Maria Santos had been invisible for so long that the fluorescent lights in Building C seemed brighter than her presence. Every morning at 5:30, she wheeled her cart through the marble corridors of Westfield Corporate Plaza, her footsteps muffled by worn sneakers that had seen too many miles. The executives who occasionally glimpsed her during their early arrivals never looked twice. She was just part of the building's infrastructure, as unremarkable as the ventilation system or the emergency exits. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The silence that surrounded Maria wasn't just professional discretion. She hadn't spoken a word in 12 years, not since the day she'd returned from overseas and discovered that some wounds cut deeper than flesh. The doctors had explained it as selective mutism brought on by trauma, but Maria knew the truth was more complicated. She had chosen silence as carefully as she had once chosen her targets, understanding that some things were better left unsaid. Her supervisor, Dennis Kowalski, treated her muteness as a convenience rather than a disability. Dennis managed the building's cleaning staff with the efficiency of a man who had never questioned his own importance. He communicated with Maria through a series of hand gestures and printed work orders, never bothering to learn that she could read lips perfectly, or that her hearing was acute enough to detect conversations 3 offices away. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Part 1. The Invisible Expert. The morning routine never varied. Maria would start on the 15th floor, working her way down through the executive suites, where venture capitalists and hedge fund managers made decisions that affected thousands of lives. She cleaned around their leather chairs and mahogany desks with the same methodical precision she had once applied to field-stripping rifles in desert conditions. Every surface received exactly the attention it required, no more, no less. The executives had their own patterns, too. Jonathan Blackwood arrived at 6:15 every morning, his Italian shoes clicking against the polished stone as he headed to the corner office that overlooked the city's financial district. He never acknowledged Maria's presence, even when she was cleaning the conference table, where he would later present quarterly reports to nervous investors. To him, she was part of the scenery, as unworthy of notice as the abstract paintings that decorated his walls. Victoria Chen, the building's head of security, was different. She had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before transitioning to corporate work, and she recognized something in Maria's bearing that others missed. The way Maria moved through spaces, always aware of exits and sightlines. The way her eyes tracked movement with mechanical precision. The way she carried herself like someone who had learned to disappear but could reappear with lethal efficiency if circumstances required it. Victoria had tried to engage Maria in conversation several times, using simple military hand signals that any veteran would recognize. Maria had acknowledged the attempts with polite nods, but had never responded with more than basic gestures indicating gratitude or understanding. The wall of silence remained intact, protecting whatever secrets lay beneath Maria's carefully constructed invisibility. The building itself was a monument to modern corporate power, 47 floors of glass and steel that housed some of the city's most influential financial institutions. The lower floors contained retail spaces and restaurants that catered to the building's professional population. The middle floors housed mid-tier management companies and consulting firms. The upper floors were reserved for the major players, the companies that moved billions of dollars with phone calls and handshakes. Maria's access was comprehensive but largely ignored. Her security badge opened every door except the most sensitive executive areas, but nobody questioned her presence anywhere in the building. She had become part of the architecture, trusted through invisibility rather than verification. The irony wasn't lost on her. In her previous life, gaining this level of access to a target-rich environment would have required months of planning and considerable risk. Now, it was simply part of her job description. The other cleaning staff maintained a respectful distance from Maria, partly because of her silence, and partly because of an indefinable quality that suggested she was different from them in ways that couldn't be easily categorized. Rosa Martinez, who cleaned the floors below Maria's assigned area, had noticed that Maria never seemed tired, even after 8-hour shifts. She moved with economy and purpose that suggested physical conditioning far beyond what their job required. Carlos Fernandez, the night security guard, had observed that Maria's cleaning cart was always organized with military precision. Every tool had its designated place. Every supply was accounted for, and her work schedule was executed with clockwork reliability. He had mentioned this to Victoria Chen during one of their shift changes, noting that Maria approached her work with the discipline of someone who had learned that attention to detail could mean the difference between life and death. The building's morning rush began around 7:30, when the elevators filled with office workers carrying coffee and checking their phones for overnight developments in global markets. Maria timed her work to avoid the heaviest foot traffic, moving through the corridors like a ghost who understood the rhythm of the living world but remained separate from it. She had perfected the art of being present without being noticed, visible without being seen. Dr. Amanda Foster, a behavioral psychologist who rented office space on the 23rd floor, had observed Maria's interactions with the building's environment with professional interest. The way Maria navigated through crowded areas without ever bumping into anyone, the way she anticipated elevator arrivals before the indicator lights appeared, the way she seemed to track multiple conversations simultaneously while appearing to focus entirely on her cleaning tasks. Amanda had considered approaching Maria about her observations, but something in the woman's bearing suggested that unwanted attention might not be welcome. There was a quality of controlled tension about Maria that reminded Amanda of her clients who had survived combat trauma. The hypervigilance masked as casual awareness, the physical conditioning maintained as a form of psychological armor, the silence that protected as much as it isolated. The executive floors presented their own unique challenges. The partners at Meridian Capital Management left classified documents on their desks, assuming that the cleaning staff couldn't read or wouldn't understand the significance of what they were seeing. Maria dusted around merger agreements and acquisition plans that would reshape entire industries, her expression never betraying whether she comprehended the implications of the information she encountered. The irony cut deeper than most people could imagine. In her previous life, Maria had been trained to gather exactly this type of intelligence, to read documents and assess strategic situations with the analytical precision that had made her one of the most effective operatives in her unit. Now she encountered sensitive information as an accidental byproduct of emptying wastebaskets and wiping down conference tables. Thomas Richardson, a senior partner at one of the investment firms, had developed a habit of conducting confidential phone conversations while Maria cleaned his office. He spoke freely about insider trading strategies and regulatory violations, apparently confident that a mute janitor posed no threat to his carefully constructed schemes. The assumption was reasonable from his perspective. What could a cleaning woman do with information about complex financial crimes? Maria's personal history remained carefully hidden beneath layers of bureaucratic documentation and deliberate misdirection. Her employment records showed a simple progression from entry-level positions to her current role as a night shift cleaner. Her references came from supervisors who remembered her as reliable and unobtrusive. Her background check had revealed nothing more interesting than a clean driving record and a tendency to pay her bills on time. The truth was considerably more complex. Maria Santos had been born Maria Elena Vasquez in a small town near the Mexican border, the daughter of a Marine Corps veteran who had taught her to shoot before she could properly ride a bicycle. Her father had recognized something exceptional in his daughter's natural abilities, the way she could calculate distances and wind patterns instinctively, the way she could remain motionless for hours while tracking targets across vast landscapes. Her military service had begun with standard infantry training, but her exceptional marksmanship scores had quickly attracted the attention of specialized recruitment officers. The transition to sniper training had felt natural, almost inevitable. The long hours of patience, the mathematical precision required for extreme distance shots, the psychological discipline needed to take human life from impossible ranges, all of it had suited her temperament perfectly. The unit she had eventually joined operated in the spaces between official military operations and classified intelligence work. They took assignments that required surgical precision and absolute deniability. Maria's final mission had involved a shot that military historians would later call impossible, a piece of marksmanship that had ended a conflict and saved thousands of lives. But it had also cost her something fundamental, something that couldn't be restored through medals or commendations. The tattoo that marked that achievement remained hidden beneath her work uniform, a intricate design that told a story in symbols that only a few people in the world could properly interpret. The artwork covered most of her left shoulder, incorporating elements that represented distance, wind speed, and the precise mathematical calculations that had made her legendary shot possible. To casual observers, it looked like decorative tribal patterns. To those who understood its significance, it was a memorial to the day Maria Santos had changed the course of history. Her transition to civilian life had been managed through a network of veterans organizations and government programs designed to help former special operations personnel disappear into normal society. The cleaning job had been selected specifically because it offered anonymity and steady income without requiring social interaction or documentation that might compromise her carefully constructed new identity. Dennis Kowalski knew none of this history when he reviewed Maria's work performance every quarter. He saw a reliable employee who never called in sick, never complained about overtime, and never caused the kind of interpersonal drama that complicated his management responsibilities. Her silence was an asset from his perspective, eliminating the possibility of workplace gossip or communication problems with clients. The building's corporate tenants appreciated the discreet professionalism that Maria represented. She cleaned their offices without disturbing sensitive documents or expensive equipment. She never asked questions about their business activities or seemed interested in anything beyond completing her assigned tasks. She was the ideal service employee, present when needed and invisible when not. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, who ran a consulting firm specializing in organizational behavior, had noticed that employee productivity seemed higher on floors where Maria worked. There was something about her presence that created a sense of calm efficiency, as if her own disciplined approach to work was somehow contagious. Elizabeth had considered conducting a formal study of this phenomenon, but the building's management had shown little interest in research that might complicate their operational procedures. The morning routine that Maria had perfected over 3 years of employment seemed destined to continue indefinitely. She had found a sustainable balance between the visibility required to maintain her job and the invisibility necessary to protect her psychological well-being. The corporate world provided exactly the kind of structured environment that helped her manage the symptoms of her trauma while avoiding the social complexities that might trigger unwanted memories. But beneath the surface of this carefully maintained routine, Maria remained what she had always been, a soldier trained for impossible missions and conditioned to respond to threats that others couldn't even recognize. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The skills that had made her legendary in military circles hadn't disappeared. They had simply been submerged beneath layers of deliberate normalcy, waiting for circumstances that might require their emergence. The cleaning cart that she pushed through the building's corridors contained the standard supplies that her job required, but Maria had modified the organization system in ways that reflected her tactical training. Every item was positioned for maximum efficiency and rapid access. The cart could be abandoned instantly if circumstances required immediate movement. The supplies could be repurposed for defensive applications if the situation demanded improvisation. These preparations seemed excessive for a corporate cleaning job, but Maria's training had taught her that survival often depended on maintaining readiness for scenarios that seemed unlikely until they became inevitable. The building that employed her might house financial companies and consulting firms, but it also represented a high-value target for anyone seeking to disrupt the economic systems that those companies controlled. The irony of her situation was perfectly clear to Maria, even if it remained invisible to everyone around her. She had been trained to eliminate high-value targets from impossible distances, and now she worked in a building full of exactly the kind of people she might once have been assigned to neutralize. The transformation from hunter to custodian represented a form of cosmic justice that she found both appropriate and deeply unsettling. Victoria Chen's attempts at veteran-to-veteran communication had not gone unnoticed, but Maria had chosen to maintain her silence for reasons that went beyond simple preference. The communities that she had served in were small and interconnected. Recognition by one veteran could lead to identification by others, potentially compromising the carefully constructed anonymity that had allowed her to disappear from her previous life. The morning sun was beginning to filter through the building's floor-to-ceiling windows when Maria completed her routine on the 15th floor and began preparing to move to the next level. Her cart was restocked, her cleaning solutions were properly mixed, and her route for the remainder of the shift was clearly planned. Nothing in her behavior suggested that this day would be different from the thousands that had preceded it. But in a conference room 3 floors above, Jonathan Blackwood was preparing for a meeting that would transform Maria's carefully maintained invisibility into the kind of visibility that could get her killed. The documents he was reviewing contained classified information about government contracts and international arms dealing, the kind of intelligence that certain organizations would do anything to obtain or protect. The connection between Maria's hidden past and Blackwood's current activities was about to surface in ways that neither of them could anticipate, setting in motion a sequence of events that would test every skill Maria had learned in her previous life and every assumption she had made about the safety of her current one. The mute janitor was about to discover that some secrets refused to stay buried, especially when they're written in ink and hidden beneath corporate uniforms. The building's morning rush was reaching its peak when Maria noticed the first sign that something had changed in her carefully ordered world. The elevator on the 16th floor was making an unusual mechanical noise, a subtle grinding that suggested maintenance issues. But more concerning was the behavior of the passengers who had been using it. Their conversations carried a tension that hadn't been present during previous shifts, and their body language suggested anxiety that went beyond normal workplace stress. Maria's training had taught her to recognize the patterns that preceded organized violence, the subtle changes in routine and behavior that indicated when a location was being surveilled or prepared for part. The coffee stain on Maria's shirt sleeve happened at exactly 7:43 in the morning, when a distracted investment banker named Marcus Webb rushed past her cart while checking his phone for overnight market developments from Asian exchanges. The collision was minor, barely more than a brush of contact, but the scalding liquid soaked through the fabric of her uniform and forced her to roll up her sleeve to assess the damage to her skin. For the first time in 3 years, the intricate tattoo on Maria's left shoulder became visible to another human being in the corporate building. The artwork was a masterpiece of symbolic representation, incorporating elements that told a story in a language that most people couldn't read. Distance markers, wind calculations, and coordinate systems were woven together with imagery that commemorated a shot that had traveled further than any sniper bullet in recorded military history. Marcus Webb was already disappearing into an elevator, too focused on his financial responsibilities to notice what he had revealed. But Dr. Amanda Foster, who had been waiting for the same elevator while reviewing patient files, saw the tattoo clearly in the moment before Maria quickly pulled her sleeve back down. The psychologist's trained eye caught details that would have escaped casual observation: the precision of the artwork, the military symbolism, and the mathematical elements that suggested technical expertise far beyond what a cleaning job would require. Amanda's doctoral work had included extensive research on military tattoos and their psychological significance for combat veterans. She recognized the specific symbols that indicated special operations training and the particular style of commemorative artwork that marked extraordinary achievements in marksmanship. The tattoo she had glimpsed belonged to someone who had served at the highest levels of military precision, someone whose skills had been tested in ways that most people couldn't imagine. The doctor made a mental note to research the specific symbols she had observed, but her immediate concern was more practical. The building employed a veteran who was clearly dealing with some form of trauma-related silence, and that veteran was working in an environment where her background was completely unknown to the people responsible for her well-being. The combination suggested potential complications that Amanda felt professionally obligated to address. Meanwhile, 3 floors above, Jonathan Blackwood was conducting a conference call that would soon transform the building from a routine corporate environment into something far more dangerous. The participants in the call included representatives from defense contractors, government officials, and international arms dealers who were coordinating a weapons transaction that had attracted the attention of several hostile intelligence organizations. The documents spread across Blackwood's conference table contained details about a shipment of advanced sniper rifles and targeting systems that were being transferred to Allied forces in a region where American military advisors were operating under deep cover. The transaction was legitimate from a legal perspective, but it was also exactly the kind of operation that enemy agents would do anything to disrupt or exploit. Blackwood's company, Meridian Capital Management, served as a financial intermediary for transactions that required careful handling and absolute discretion. Their role was to process payments and manage documentation while maintaining the kind of professional distance that allowed plausible deniability if operations went sideways. The profits were substantial, but so were the risks, especially when dealing with weapon systems that could change the balance of power in active conflict zones. The call was being monitored by at least 3 different intelligence agencies, including one that had already dispatched a team to acquire the documents that Blackwood was reviewing. The building's security systems were sophisticated, but not designed to handle the kind of professional infiltration that was being planned by operatives who specialized in corporate espionage and targeted assassination. Victoria Chen had noticed irregularities in the building's security footage that morning. Subtle indicators that suggested someone had been conducting surveillance of the facility's access points and emergency procedures. The anomalies were minor enough that they might have been coincidental, but her military training had taught her to trust instincts that flagged potential threats before they became obvious. She had increased patrols on the executive floors and alerted her security team to maintain heightened awareness, but the building's management had shown little interest in security concerns that couldn't be documented with hard evidence. Corporate executives tended to view security warnings as unnecessary expenses unless they were accompanied by immediate and obvious threats. The first clear indication of trouble came at 8:15, when the building's fire alarm system activated on floors 12 through 16. The alert appeared to be triggered by smoke detectors in a utility closet, suggesting an electrical malfunction or minor maintenance issue. Victoria responded according to standard protocols, dispatching security personnel to investigate while coordinating with the fire department to verify the nature of the emergency. But the alarm was actually a diversionary tactic designed to create confusion and draw security attention away from the building's upper floors. While Victoria's team focused on the supposed fire emergency, a 4-person infiltration team was entering the building through a service entrance that had been compromised earlier that morning through a combination of electronic surveillance and social engineering. The team leader was a former Special Forces operative named Dmitry Volkov, who had transitioned to private military contracting after leaving Russian special operations under circumstances that remained classified. His team included specialists in electronic warfare, close-quarters combat, and intelligence extraction who had been hired to acquire the documents in Blackwood's possession and eliminate any witnesses who might compromise their client's anonymity. Their intelligence about the building was comprehensive, including detailed floor plans, security protocols, and personnel information that had been gathered through weeks of careful surveillance. They knew about Victoria Chen's military background and had planned their operation to neutralize her security team before she could organize effective resistance. They knew about the cleaning staff's schedules and had timed their infiltration to avoid civilian casualties that might complicate their extraction. What they didn't know was that the building's most dangerous occupant was a mute janitor, whose existence hadn't appeared in any of their intelligence reports. Maria was cleaning the 14th floor when the fire alarm activated, but her response was different from the other building occupants, who began evacuating according to established emergency procedures. Her military training had taught her to assess threats independently, rather than assuming that official announcements reflected actual conditions. The timing and location of the alarm triggered instincts that had been dormant for 3 years but remained as sharp as ever. She positioned her cleaning cart to block access to a stairwell that wasn't being used for evacuation, then moved to an observation point that allowed her to monitor the building's main corridors. The evacuation was proceeding normally, but Maria noticed that several people were moving against the flow of evacuees, heading toward the upper floors rather than away from them. Their movement patterns were too purposeful and coordinated to be coincidental. The realization that the building was under attack activated neural pathways that Maria had thought were permanently suppressed. Her mind began processing tactical information with the mechanical precision that had once made her legendary among military snipers. Distance calculations, sight lines, potential defensive positions, and escape routes were automatically cataloged and prioritized according to threat assessment protocols that had been drilled into her through years of specialized training. Her first priority was communication, but her muteness presented a unique challenge. She couldn't use voice communications to alert security or coordinate with Victoria Chen's team. Instead, she accessed the building's emergency communication system through a maintenance terminal, using text messages to report suspicious activity on the upper floors. The messages were routed to Victoria's security office, but they would be processed as routine maintenance alerts unless someone recognized their significance. The infiltration team reached the 15th floor without encountering resistance, their electronic warfare specialist having disabled the security cameras that might have revealed their presence. They moved with the professional efficiency of operatives who had conducted similar missions in more dangerous environments, but they were confident that a corporate office building wouldn't present the kind of opposition they had faced in active combat zones. Dmitry Volkov reviewed the building schematics on his tablet while his team prepared to breach Blackwood's office. The documents they needed were located in a safe that their intelligence indicated could be opened, either through electronic bypass or through coercing Blackwood to provide the combination. Either approach would be effective, but speed was essential to avoid complications with law enforcement response. The team's communications specialist was monitoring emergency frequencies and had confirmed that fire department response was focused on the lower floors. Local police units were being diverted to handle traffic management around the building's evacuation zone. The window of opportunity was optimal for completing their mission and extracting through predetermined routes before organized resistance could be mounted. But Maria was already moving to intercept them, her knowledge of the building's layout combining with tactical instincts that had been refined through operations in some of the world's most dangerous environments. She retrieved equipment from her cleaning cart that seemed innocuous but could be repurposed for defensive applications. Cleaning chemicals could be combined to create smoke screens or chemical irritants. Maintenance tools could serve as improvised weapons. The cart itself could be used as mobile cover or as a ram for breaching doorways. The transformation from invisible janitor to lethal operative was happening with frightening speed, muscle memory, and mental conditioning overriding 3 years of deliberate suppression. Maria's silence, which had been a symptom of trauma, was becoming a tactical advantage that would allow her to move through the building without revealing her position to enemies who expected any resistance to be loud and obvious. Victoria Chen received Maria's text messages at the same time that her security team reported losing contact with the officers investigating the fire alarm. The combination of factors triggered alert protocols that brought Victoria's military experience to bear on a situation that was rapidly evolving beyond normal corporate security parameters. She recognized the indicators of a coordinated attack and began implementing countermeasures that drew on her combat training rather than her civilian security background. But Victoria's response was hampered by limited personnel and equipment that was designed for routine security rather than armed conflict. Her team consisted of 3 guards with basic training and communication equipment that couldn't be used for tactical coordination. The building's layout favored attackers who had studied the terrain, and the evacuation procedures had removed most potential witnesses while creating confusion that masked the infiltrators' movements. Jonathan Blackwood was unaware that his office had become the focal point of a military operation that was about to test every assumption about safety and security in the corporate world. He remained focused on his conference call, discussing financial arrangements that seemed disconnected from the violence that was approaching his fortified executive suite. The documents that had attracted deadly attention remained spread across his conference table, unprotected except by the kind of routine security measures that were adequate for corporate espionage but useless against professional killers. The infiltration team reached Blackwood's floor at 8:27, their electronic specialist disabling the elevator controls to prevent unauthorized access while the breach team prepared to assault the executive suite. Their intelligence indicated that Blackwood's office was equipped with a panic room, but their planning assumed that they could complete their mission before he could reach that protection. Dmitry Volkov's team had conducted similar operations in corporate environments across 3 continents, and their success rate was perfect. They expected the current mission to be completed within 15 minutes, with extraction accomplished before local law enforcement could mount effective resistance. The building's security was sophisticated enough to deter ordinary criminals, but inadequate against operatives with military training and specialized equipment. Maria reached the executive floor through a service stairwell that didn't appear on the building's standard floor plans, her knowledge of maintenance routes providing access that the infiltrators hadn't anticipated. She moved with the silent efficiency that had once allowed her to approach targets across hostile terrain without being detected, every step calculated to avoid creating sound or visual signatures that might reveal her presence. Her assessment of the tactical situation was rapid and comprehensive. 4 hostiles with military training and professional equipment. Unknown weapons configuration, but certainly lethal. Probable objective was intelligence extraction rather than general destruction, which meant they would be focused on specific targets rather than random violence. Their movement patterns suggested familiarity with the building's layout and security protocols. The advantages were heavily stacked against her. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and operating without support or communication backup. But she also had knowledge of the terrain that the attackers lacked, and she had skills that had been proven in environments far more challenging than a corporate office building. Most importantly, she had the element of surprise. The infiltrators had no reason to expect resistance from a cleaning woman who officially didn't even exist in their intelligence reports. Maria's first tactical decision was to separate the infiltrators from their planned routes and communication links. She accessed the building's environmental controls through a maintenance panel, altering lighting and air circulation systems to create conditions that would favor her knowledge of the terrain, while disorienting attackers who were operating from memorized floor plans. The changes were subtle but would compound over time to create significant tactical advantages. Her second decision was more difficult. Engaging armed hostiles would require using skills that she had deliberately suppressed, crossing psychological barriers that had taken years to construct. But the alternative was allowing professional killers to complete their mission, potentially resulting in casualties among people who had become her responsibility through 3 years of shared routine and mutual respect. The choice was ultimately predetermined by training that had been designed to override personal considerations when operational success was at stake. Maria had been conditioned to respond to threats with decisive action, and that conditioning was reasserting itself despite her conscious desire to remain invisible and uninvolved. She retrieved a fire axe from an emergency station, testing its weight and balance with the automatic precision of someone who had been trained to evaluate improvised weapons under combat conditions. The tool was crude compared to the specialized equipment she had once carried, but it would be effective at close range against targets who weren't expecting resistance from corporate cleaning staff. The infiltration team breached Blackwood's outer office at 8:31, their entry technique smooth and professional. The executive assistant's desk was unoccupied due to the building evacuation, and the path to Blackwood's private office was clear. Dmitry Volkov signaled for his team to maintain position, while he assessed the target area for unexpected complications or defensive measures. Jonathan Blackwood heard the sound of his outer door being forced, and finally understood that his morning was about to become considerably more dangerous than routine financial negotiations. He activated his office's panic alarm and began moving toward the secure communication system that would allow him to contact emergency services directly, but his movements were being tracked by the infiltration team's surveillance equipment. The electronic warfare specialist had disabled the building's main communication systems, but Blackwood's panic room was equipped with independent systems that couldn't be compromised from outside locations. The race was now between Blackwood's ability to reach safety and the infiltrator's ability to breach his defenses before backup could arrive. Maria positioned herself in a corridor intersection that would allow her to observe the infiltrator's approach while maintaining multiple escape routes. Her tactical analysis indicated that the team would split their attention between securing their primary objective and maintaining their extraction route, creating vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone with appropriate training and timing. The building's modified environmental systems were beginning to affect visibility and air quality on the executive floor, creating conditions that resembled the challenging terrain where Maria had learned to operate as a sniper. The familiar environment triggered memories and instincts that had been buried beneath 3 years of silence, but now those memories were becoming tactical assets rather than psychological burdens. The transformation was accelerating beyond Maria's conscious control. The mute janitor who had been invisible for 3 years was disappearing, replaced by the operative who had once changed the course of a war with a single impossible shot. The skills that had made her legendary were surfacing despite her efforts to keep them suppressed, and the building that had been her sanctuary was becoming a battlefield where those skills would be tested once again. The infiltration team was about to discover that their intelligence about the building's occupants was incomplete in ways that would prove fatal. The corporate environment that had seemed controllable was about to become as dangerous as any combat zone, and the professional killers who had never failed a mission were about to encounter resistance from someone whose capabilities exceeded their worst-case planning scenarios. Dmitry Volkov's team advanced toward Blackwood's private office with the confidence of operators who had never encountered effective resistance in corporate environments. Their equipment included military-grade weapons and communication systems that were designed for operations in hostile territory, but they were unprepared for the psychological challenge of fighting an opponent who could disappear and reappear like a ghost in terrain that she knew better than they knew their own equipment. The first indication that something was wrong came when their electronic specialist reported communication interference that couldn't be explained by the building's standard systems. The signals were being disrupted by modifications to the environmental controls that suggested someone with technical knowledge was actively working against their mission. But their intelligence indicated that the building's security staff lacked the training necessary for sophisticated countermeasures. Maria watched through a maintenance panel as the infiltrators approached Blackwood's office, her mind automatically calculating angles and distances with the precision that had once made her the most feared sniper in her unit. The fire axe in her hands felt primitive compared to the high-tech rifle system she had once used. But the fundamental principles of tactical engagement remained constant, regardless of the weapons involved. The moment of contact was approaching, and with it the test that would determine whether 3 years of deliberate invisibility had dulled the skills that had once made Maria Santos the most dangerous person in any room she entered. The corporate building was about to become a battlefield, and the mute janitor was about to remind the world why some warriors never truly retire, they just wait for the right moment to reveal who they really are. Attack. The building that had felt like a sanctuary was beginning to feel like something else entirely, and the skills that she had buried beneath 3 years of silence were starting to surface whether she wanted them to or not. The transformation was about to begin, but it would start not with dramatic action but with a simple accident that would expose the tattoo hidden beneath Maria's uniform and reveal the truth about the mute janitor, who had once ended a war with a single, impossible shot. The first hostile went down silently at 8:34 when Maria emerged from a service corridor behind the infiltration team's rear guard, with the fire axe moving in a precise arc that had been calculated to sever the carotid artery without creating unnecessary noise. The operative's body dropped to the carpeted floor with barely a whisper, his communication equipment automatically switching to emergency beacon mode as his vital signs flatlined. Dmitry Volkov heard the subtle electronic tone through his earpiece and immediately understood that his team had encountered resistance that hadn't appeared in their intelligence reports. He signaled for defensive positions while scanning the corridor for threats that shouldn't have existed in a corporate office building. The precision and silence of the attack suggested military training that exceeded anything they had expected from building security. Maria had already disappeared back into the maintenance areas, using her knowledge of the building's hidden passages to reposition for the next engagement. The transformation from invisible janitor to lethal operative was complete now, muscle memory and tactical instincts overriding 3 years of deliberate suppression. Every movement was calculated for maximum efficiency and minimum exposure, the kind of methodical precision that had once made her legendary among special operations snipers. The second hostile fell 3 minutes later, when Maria used the building's modified environmental systems to create a smoke screen that concealed her approach until she was close enough to strike with the improvised weapon that had replaced her precision rifle. The kill was clean and professional, executed with the same mechanical efficiency that had characterized her long-distance marksmanship. 2 down, 2 remaining, plus whatever backup might be waiting outside the building. Volkov's remaining team members were now operating under combat protocols that reflected their growing understanding that they were facing an opponent with capabilities that matched their own training. The corporate infiltration had become a military engagement, and their operational parameters shifted from stealth and speed to survival and extraction. But they were committed to completing their mission, even if it meant adapting to unexpected resistance. Jonathan Blackwood had reached his panic room and activated every security system at his disposal, but he remained trapped on a floor that was now controlled by professional killers who were systematically working their way toward his position. His communication with emergency services was being jammed by electronic warfare equipment that was designed to prevent exactly the kind of coordination that might compromise the infiltrator's mission. Victoria Chen had finally understood the true nature of the threat facing the building, but her security team was pinned down on the lower floors by explosives that had been positioned to prevent reinforcement of the upper levels. She had requested immediate law enforcement and military support, but the response time would be measured in hours rather than minutes. The building's occupants were on their own against enemies who had planned for every contingency except the one they were actually facing. Dr. Amanda Foster had evacuated with the rest of the building's civilian personnel, but her memory of the tattoo she had glimpsed on Maria's shoulder was beginning to make connections that seemed impossible in the context of a corporate cleaning job. The symbols she had observed were consistent with commemorative artwork that marked extraordinary achievements in military marksmanship, the kind of recognition that was reserved for operatives whose skills exceeded normal human capabilities. She began making phone calls to contacts in the veterans community, describing the tattoo elements she could remember and asking about their significance. The responses were initially cautious, but when she mentioned the specific combination of distance markers and mathematical symbols, she was transferred to more senior people, who asked increasingly detailed questions about where and when she had observed the artwork. The conversation that changed everything came when Amanda was connected to Colonel Sarah Mitchell, a retired Marine Corps officer who had served as a liaison between special operations units and military intelligence organizations. Colonel Mitchell's reaction to Amanda's description was immediate and alarming. The tattoo belonged to someone who had participated in classified operations that remained sensitive even years after their completion. Maria Santos, if that was even her real name, was not a mute janitor with trauma-related communication issues. She was Maria Elena Vasquez, formerly Staff Sergeant Vasquez, the sniper who had made the longest confirmed kill shot in military history. The 8-mile shot that had eliminated a terrorist leader and ended a conflict that had been consuming American resources and lives for nearly a decade. The operative whose existence had been officially denied and whose service records had been classified at levels that prevented normal background checks from revealing her true identity. Colonel Mitchell immediately contacted active duty personnel who could coordinate with law enforcement agencies that had jurisdiction over the building where Maria was apparently engaged in combat operations. But the communication chain was complex, and the time required for verification and authorization would exceed the tactical timeline that was playing out on the executive floors of a corporate office building. Maria's third kill came when she used the building's fire suppression system to create a pressurized water distraction that allowed her to approach the infiltration team's electronic specialist while he was focused on maintaining their communication jamming. The fire axe struck with surgical precision, severing the spinal column at the base of the skull and dropping the operative instantly. His equipment continued functioning for several minutes before automatic shutdown protocols disabled the systems that had been preventing outside communication. Dmitry Volkov was now alone against an opponent whose capabilities had proven superior to his team's training and equipment. The mission that should have been completed in 15 minutes had stretched beyond 30, and his extraction window was rapidly closing. But the documents in Blackwood's office represented intelligence that his clients would kill to obtain and kill to protect, making retreat a more dangerous option than continued engagement. He made the tactical decision to force a confrontation on terms that would favor his remaining advantages in weapons and armor. The corridor outside Blackwood's office provided clear sight lines and limited cover, creating conditions where superior firepower could overcome stealth and terrain knowledge. He positioned himself with overlapping fields of fire and waited for his opponent to reveal herself. Maria understood the tactical situation perfectly. The remaining hostile had superior weapons and had chosen terrain that eliminated most of her advantages in mobility and concealment. A direct assault would be suicide against an opponent with military-grade equipment and professional training. But she had other options that drew on capabilities that went beyond close-quarters combat. The building's architecture included features that weren't apparent from standard floor plans: maintenance areas and utility spaces that connected different levels through routes that bypassed normal security measures. Maria's 3 years of cleaning the building had given her comprehensive knowledge of these hidden passages, including access points that led to elevated positions overlooking the executive floor. She retrieved additional equipment from emergency stations throughout the building, improvising a sniper's kit from materials that were designed for routine maintenance and emergency response. A surveyor's scope from the building engineering office provided optical magnification. Cable management tools could be adapted to create a stable shooting platform. Maintenance chemicals could be combined to create markers that would help with range estimation and wind calculation. The improvised rifle was assembled from components that no reasonable person would consider weapons until they were combined with the kind of mathematical precision and mechanical understanding that had made Maria legendary among military snipers. A compressed air system from the building's pneumatic tool storage provided the propulsion mechanism. Steel rods from the construction supply area served as projectiles. The guidance systems were purely optical and mathematical, calculated in Maria's mind using formulas that had been drilled into her through years of specialized training. The shooting position she selected was nearly 200 meters from Volkov's location, accessed through ventilation shafts and utility corridors that weren't visible from the executive floor. The range was minimal compared to the 8-mile shot that had made her famous, but the target was protected by body armor and positioned behind cover that required precision that would challenge even the most advanced military rifle systems. Maria's preparation was methodical and thorough, every detail calculated to ensure that her single shot would end the engagement decisively. She couldn't afford to miss or to inflict a non-fatal wound that would alert her target to her position. The improvised weapon system was crude but functional, capable of delivering a projectile with enough velocity and accuracy to penetrate body armor at the range she had selected. The mathematics of the shot included factors that would have challenged a trained physicist. Air pressure variations caused by the building's modified environmental systems. Structural vibrations from the fire suppression equipment that was still operating on lower floors. The psychological stress that could affect her muscle control and breathing rhythm. All of these variables had to be calculated and compensated for using mental processes that had been refined through years of training and combat experience. Dmitry Volkov was checking his extraction timeline when the steel rod punched through his tactical vest and severed his aorta with surgical precision. The impact was silent except for the sound of his body hitting the floor, a whisper of movement that barely disturbed the corporate environment where he had come to steal secrets and commit murder. His death was as professional and efficient as anything he had ever accomplished in his career as a military contractor. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the hum of building systems that had been modified to serve tactical purposes rather than corporate comfort. Maria remained in her shooting position for several minutes, ensuring that no additional hostiles were approaching and that the threat to the building's occupants had been completely eliminated. Her improvised sniper system was disassembled and dispersed, its components returning to their innocent functions as maintenance equipment and emergency supplies. Jonathan Blackwood emerged from his panic room to find his office floor scattered with the bodies of professional killers who had come to steal documents that could have compromised ongoing military operations in several active conflict zones. The papers that had seemed like routine financial arrangements were actually intelligence that enemy organizations would have used to target American personnel operating under deep cover in hostile territory. Victoria Chen arrived with a tactical response team that had been assembled from local law enforcement and federal agents who specialized in corporate terrorism cases. The scene they encountered was unprecedented in their experience. 4 dead hostiles with military equipment and training, eliminated by someone who had used improvised weapons and superior tactics to defeat a professional infiltration team. The investigation that followed was complicated by the classified nature of the documents that had attracted the attack, and by the unofficial status of the operative who had defended them. Maria's true identity couldn't be revealed without compromising ongoing intelligence operations, but her actions had prevented a security breach that could have resulted in the deaths of American personnel in multiple theaters of operation. Dr. Amanda Foster's phone calls had finally reached people with the authority to coordinate official responses, but by the time military liaisons arrived at the building, the engagement was over, and Maria had disappeared into the same invisible routine that had protected her for 3 years. The mute janitor had returned, but now there were people who understood exactly who she really was and what she had accomplished. The debriefing sessions were conducted in secure facilities with participants who held security clearances that allowed them to discuss operations that officially had never occurred. Maria's silence was no longer seen as a disability or trauma response, but as operational security that protected intelligence assets in ongoing missions. She communicated through written reports that demonstrated analytical capabilities and tactical understanding that exceeded the training of most active duty personnel. Colonel Mitchell flew in from Washington to personally conduct Maria's evaluation, bringing with her documentation that revealed the full scope of the operative's military service and the reasons why her transition to civilian life had required such elaborate security measures. The 8-mile shot that had ended a war had also made Maria a target for enemy organizations that would do anything to eliminate the sniper who had demonstrated capabilities that threatened their operational security. The building's cleaning staff had been unaware that they were working alongside someone whose skills exceeded those of entire special operations units, but now Maria's colleagues began to understand why she had always seemed different from typical civilian employees. Her silence and hypervigilance weren't symptoms of trauma, but professional habits that had kept her alive in environments where the smallest mistake could be fatal. Dennis Kowalski, Maria's supervisor, found himself being interviewed by federal agents who wanted to understand how his employee had acquired knowledge of the building's layout that exceeded the information available to the security staff. His description of Maria's work habits revealed patterns of behavior that were consistent with intelligence gathering and tactical preparation, activities that had seemed like unusual attention to detail but were actually operational planning. The corporate executives who had dismissed Maria as invisible infrastructure were forced to confront the reality that their building had been protected by someone whose capabilities exceeded anything they could have hired through conventional security contractors. The mute janitor who had cleaned their offices was a national asset whose service had saved thousands of lives and whose continued anonymity was essential for ongoing operations. The resolution of Maria's situation required negotiations between multiple government agencies and private corporations that needed to balance operational security with recognition of extraordinary service. She couldn't return to her previous military role because her cover had been compromised, but she also couldn't continue working as a cleaning woman now that her true identity was known to federal investigators. The solution was a position with a private security firm that specialized in protecting corporate clients who required discretion and expertise that exceeded normal commercial services. Maria's official title was security consultant, but her actual role was to provide threat assessment and tactical support for executives who were targets of the same kind of professional infiltration that had been attempted at Westfield Corporate Plaza. Her first assignment was protecting Jonathan Blackwood, whose documents had attracted the attack that had forced her out of anonymity. The irony was perfect. The executive who had never noticed her existence was now dependent on her skills for his survival. The invisible janitor had become the visible guardian, but her silence remained an asset that allowed her to observe and assess threats without revealing her capabilities to potential enemies. The tattoo that had been hidden beneath her uniform was now displayed openly, its symbols serving as identification that allowed other veterans to recognize her achievements without requiring verbal explanations. The artwork that had once commemorated a legendary shot was now a professional credential that opened doors to opportunities that had been closed during her years of enforced invisibility. Dr. Amanda Foster became Maria's official psychologist, tasked with helping her transition from covert operations to legitimate security work, while maintaining the mental discipline that had allowed her to function at the highest levels of military service. Their sessions were conducted in sign language and written communication, respecting Maria's choice to maintain silence while providing professional support for the psychological challenges of her new role. The building where Maria had worked as a janitor became a case study in corporate security, with her tactical innovations being incorporated into defensive protocols that were implemented at facilities across the country. The environmental system modifications and improvised weapon techniques that she had used to defeat the infiltration team were classified and distributed to security professionals who might face similar threats. Victoria Chen received commendation for her role in coordinating the emergency response, but she was also assigned to work with Maria on developing security protocols that could prevent future infiltrations. The two veterans formed a professional partnership that combined Victoria's administrative expertise with Maria's tactical capabilities, creating a security model that was copied by corporations across multiple industries. The infiltration team's clients were never identified, but intelligence analysts suspected that the attack had been sponsored by organizations that were seeking to compromise American military operations in regions where Maria's former unit was still active. Her successful defense of the documents had prevented security breaches that could have resulted in casualties among personnel who were operating undercover in hostile territories. The media coverage of the incident was carefully managed to protect operational security while acknowledging that a terrorist attack had been prevented by exceptional individual action. Maria's identity remained classified, but the story of the mute janitor who had defeated professional killers became part of corporate security folklore, inspiring defensive preparations and tactical training at facilities that might be targeted by similar operations. 6 months after the attack, Maria received a visit from her former commanding officer, General Patricia Hayes, who had traveled from the Pentagon to personally deliver recognition that couldn't be awarded through normal military channels. The meeting was held in a secure facility, but the medal that was presented acknowledged Maria's service during both her military career and her civilian defense of critical intelligence assets. The ceremony was private and unofficial, but it represented acknowledgement from the highest levels of military leadership that Maria's actions had preserved operational security that was essential for ongoing missions. The 8-mile shot that had made her famous was classified, but the corporate building defense was a matter of public record that demonstrated her continued value as a national asset. Maria's new career allowed her to use skills that had been suppressed during her years as a cleaning woman, but it also required her to maintain the psychological discipline that had allowed her to survive in combat environments. Her silence remained a tactical advantage that allowed her to assess threats and coordinate responses without revealing her capabilities to potential enemies. The building where she had once been invisible now served as her base of operations, its executive floors transformed into a security command center that monitored threats against corporate clients across multiple industries. The conference room where Jonathan Blackwood had conducted his dangerous phone calls was now equipped with communication systems that allowed Maria to coordinate protective operations from a central location. Her reputation in the private security industry was built on the foundation of her military achievements, but it was sustained by her continued demonstration of capabilities that exceeded normal professional standards. Clients who hired her firm received protection that was based on tactics and techniques that had been proven in the world's most dangerous environments. The tattoo that had been revealed by a coffee stain was now recognized by military personnel and security professionals as identification of someone whose service had influenced the outcome of major conflicts. The symbols that had once been hidden beneath a janitor's uniform were now displayed as credentials that opened doors to the highest levels of government and corporate leadership. Maria's transformation from invisible employee to recognized expert was complete, but her fundamental character remained unchanged. She continued to approach every assignment with the methodical precision that had characterized her work as both a sniper and a cleaning woman. The attention to detail that had once been applied to emptying wastebaskets was now focused on protecting lives and preventing security breaches. The mute janitor had found her voice through actions rather than words, proving that leadership and expertise could be demonstrated through performance rather than proclamation. Her silence, which had once been seen as a limitation, was now understood as a professional asset that allowed her to operate more effectively than colleagues who relied on verbal communication. The story of Maria Santos became a legend in both military and corporate security circles. But the woman herself remained focused on the mission rather than the recognition. She had learned that true service meant being ready to act when action was needed, regardless of whether that action would be acknowledged or rewarded. Her career had come full circle, from military sniper to invisible janitor to recognized security expert, but each phase had prepared her for the next challenge in ways that couldn't have been planned or predicted. The skills that had made her legendary in combat had been preserved through years of deliberate invisibility, emerging intact when circumstances required their application. The building that had been her sanctuary was now her fortress, its corridors and maintenance areas transformed from hiding places into tactical advantages that could be used to protect others. The executive floors that had once ignored her existence were now dependent on her expertise for their security and survival. Maria had proven that heroism wasn't about rank or recognition, but about having the courage to act when action mattered most. The mute janitor's tattoo had revealed more than military service. It had revealed a commitment to protecting others that transcended job descriptions and official responsibilities. The weeks following the incident at Westfield Corporate Plaza brought changes that rippled through Maria's carefully constructed world like stones thrown into still water. Her new role as a security consultant required her to navigate social complexities that she had avoided for 3 years. But it also provided opportunities to use skills that had been dormant since her transition to civilian life. The private security firm that employed her, Aegis Strategic Solutions, specialized in protecting high-value corporate clients who faced threats that exceeded the capabilities of conventional security services. Maria's first briefing was conducted in a conference room that overlooked the same city where she had once pushed a cleaning cart through marble corridors, but now she sat at a polished table, reviewing threat assessments and tactical plans rather than emptying wastebaskets and dusting furniture. Her new supervisor was Catherine Walsh, a former CIA operative who had transitioned to private sector work after 20 years in intelligence gathering and counterterrorism operations. Catherine understood the psychological challenges that Maria faced in adapting to a role that required interaction with colleagues and clients, but she also recognized the tactical advantages that Maria's silence provided in situations where conventional communication might compromise operational security. The team that Maria joined included specialists from various military and intelligence backgrounds, each bringing expertise that had been developed in different theaters of operation around the world. Marcus Chen had served with Navy SEALs in maritime operations that required underwater infiltration and coastal assault techniques. Sarah Rodriguez had worked with Army Rangers in mountain warfare environments that demanded extreme physical conditioning and survival skills. David Thompson had been an Air Force pararescue specialist who had conducted combat search and rescue missions in hostile territory. None of them had experience with the kind of long-range precision marksmanship that had made Maria legendary in military circles, but they all understood the value of having a sniper on their team, who could provide overwatch and eliminate threats at distances that exceeded the range of conventional security weapons. Maria's reputation had preceded her through military networks that connected former special operations personnel across different branches of service. The integration process was complicated by Maria's communication preferences, but the team adapted to working with someone who conveyed information through written reports and tactical diagrams, rather than verbal briefings. Her analytical reports were comprehensive and precise, providing threat assessments that included details that other security professionals might overlook. Her tactical plans incorporated contingencies that reflected experience with operations where failure meant death rather than professional embarrassment. Jonathan Blackwood had requested that Maria be assigned as his primary protection specialist, a decision that reflected both gratitude for her role in saving his life and recognition that his business activities would continue to attract attention from hostile organizations. The documents that had been targeted during the infiltration were part of ongoing transactions that involved weapons systems and intelligence sharing agreements with allied governments, making Blackwood a continuing target for enemy operatives who wanted to disrupt American military support operations. Maria's protection strategy for Blackwood combined traditional close protection techniques with innovations that drew on her sniper training and her knowledge of corporate environments. She established observation posts in buildings that overlooked Blackwood's regular routes and meeting locations, creating a network of overwatch positions that could provide early warning of potential threats. Her tactical advantage was the ability to engage hostile forces at ranges that exceeded their ability to return effective fire. The first test of Maria's new role came 3 weeks after the Westfield incident, when intelligence sources indicated that another infiltration team was planning to target Blackwood during a business meeting at a downtown hotel. The threat assessment suggested that the attackers had learned from the failure of the previous operation and were planning to use different tactics that would avoid the kind of close-quarters engagement that had proved fatal to Dmitry Volkov's team. Maria's preparation for the hotel operation required coordination with local law enforcement and federal agencies that had jurisdiction over counter-terrorism activities in urban environments. Her briefings were conducted through Catherine Walsh, who served as her voice in meetings where verbal communication was essential for operational coordination. The tactical plans that Maria developed were distributed to all participants, providing detailed diagrams and written instructions that eliminated the need for verbal explanation during the operation itself. The hotel chosen for Blackwood's meeting was a 40-story tower in the city's financial district, its architecture providing numerous potential shooting positions for snipers and multiple escape routes for infiltration teams. Maria's analysis identified 17 different locations where hostile operatives could position themselves to target Blackwood during his arrival, meeting, and departure. Each potential threat position required specific countermeasures that were integrated into an overall security plan that covered every phase of the operation. Maria's overwatch position was established on the roof of an adjacent building, providing clear sightlines to the hotel's main entrance and the conference room where Blackwood's meeting would take place. Her equipment was military-grade rather than improvised, a precision rifle system that could engage targets at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters with accuracy that was measured in inches rather than feet. The weapon was legally registered to Aegis Strategic Solutions and authorized for use in protective operations that had been coordinated with federal agencies. The surveillance network that Maria established included team members positioned at street level who could provide real-time intelligence about pedestrian and vehicle traffic in the area surrounding the hotel. Marcus Chen monitored the hotel's main entrance while Sarah Rodriguez covered the parking garage where Blackwood would arrive. David Thompson maintained position in the hotel lobby where he could coordinate with building security and respond to threats that penetrated the outer security perimeter. Communication between team members was maintained through encrypted radio systems that allowed tactical coordination without revealing operational details to unauthorized listeners. Maria's contributions to the communication network were transmitted through Catherine Walsh, who had positioned herself in a mobile command center that could monitor all aspects of the operation while maintaining contact with law enforcement agencies that were providing backup support. The hostile team that had been planning to target Blackwood included 6 operatives with training that exceeded the capabilities of the previous infiltration group. Intelligence sources indicated that they had studied the Westfield incident and had developed tactics specifically designed to counter the kind of individual resistance that had proved so effective against Dmitry Volkov's team. Their plan involved simultaneous attacks from multiple directions that would overwhelm security measures that were designed to handle single-source threats. Maria's tactical analysis had anticipated this development, and her security plan included contingencies that could address multiple simultaneous threats without compromising the primary mission of protecting Blackwood. Her overwatch position provided visual coverage of 3 different potential attack routes, and her team members were positioned to handle threats that developed outside her field of fire. The coordination required split-second timing and absolute trust between team members who were operating in an environment where mistakes could be fatal. The first indication of hostile activity came at 9:15 in the morning, when Sarah Rodriguez reported unusual vehicle movement in the parking garage that suggested surveillance rather than normal hotel business. The vehicles were positioned to provide observation of arrival routes while maintaining escape options that would allow rapid departure if their activities were detected. Maria adjusted her scope to cover the garage entrance while maintaining awareness of other potential threat areas. The second indicator appeared 10 minutes later, when Marcus Chen observed pedestrians near the hotel's main entrance who were displaying the kind of coordinated movement patterns that suggested military training. Their positioning was too precise to be coincidental, and their behavior indicated that they were conducting final reconnaissance before initiating an attack sequence. David Thompson began moving toward a position where he could intercept the potential hostiles if they attempted to enter the hotel. Maria's communication with her team was conducted through hand signals that were transmitted to Catherine Walsh through a video link, allowing her to coordinate team movements without using voice communication that might be intercepted by hostile surveillance equipment. The tactical situation was developing exactly as Maria had predicted, but the complexity of managing multiple simultaneous threats required coordination that tested every aspect of their operational planning. Jonathan Blackwood arrived at the hotel at 9:30. His armored vehicle following a route that had been selected to minimize exposure to potential sniper positions while maintaining access to the garage entrance that provided the most secure approach to the building interior. Maria tracked his movement through her scope, while scanning for muzzle flashes or other indicators that hostile snipers were preparing to engage the convoy. The attack began at 9:32 when the hostile team initiated a coordinated assault that included sniper fire from 2 different buildings and ground-level attackers who attempted to breach the hotel's security perimeter. Maria's first shot eliminated the sniper who was targeting Blackwood's convoy, the bullet traveling 700 meters through urban air currents that required compensation for wind patterns created by the surrounding buildings. The target dropped instantly, his weapon clattering onto the rooftop where he had been positioned. The second hostile sniper was positioned in a building that was partially obscured by construction equipment, requiring Maria to calculate a shot path that would clear multiple obstacles while maintaining the precision necessary to neutralize a target at extreme range. Her second shot was fired 3 seconds after the first, the bullet punching through a gap in the construction barriers and eliminating the threat before the sniper could adjust his aim to compensate for his partner's elimination. Marcus Chen engaged the ground-level attackers with tactical precision that reflected his Navy SEAL training, using close-quarters combat techniques that were designed to neutralize multiple opponents in confined spaces. His position near the hotel entrance allowed him to intercept the hostile operatives before they could reach Blackwood's convoy, but the engagement was complicated by the presence of civilian pedestrians who were fleeing the area as the shooting began. Sarah Rodriguez coordinated with hotel security to lock down the parking garage and prevent hostile operatives from accessing Blackwood through underground routes that might bypass the street-level security measures. Her position allowed her to monitor multiple access points while maintaining communication with law enforcement units that were responding to reports of gunfire in the financial district. David Thompson's role evolved from security coordination to tactical command as the operation expanded beyond the original threat assessment. His experience with combat search and rescue operations provided the leadership skills necessary to coordinate multiple team elements while adapting to developments that hadn't been anticipated in the original planning. His communication with federal response teams ensured that backup support would be available if the situation escalated beyond the team's ability to handle independently. Maria's third and fourth shots eliminated hostile operatives who were attempting to escape through predetermined routes that had been identified during the intelligence preparation phase of the operation. Her knowledge of urban sniper tactics allowed her to anticipate the routes that trained operatives would use when their primary mission failed and survival became the priority. Both targets were eliminated at ranges exceeding 800 meters, demonstrating the kind of precision marksmanship that had made her reputation in military circles. The entire engagement lasted less than 4 minutes, But it represented a tactical victory that prevented what could have been a catastrophic security breach. Blackwood reached the hotel safely and was able to conduct his business meeting while law enforcement agencies processed the scene and collected evidence that would be used to identify the organizations responsible for planning the attack. The debriefing that followed the hotel operation was conducted in a secure facility where federal agents could discuss the classified nature of Blackwood's business activities and their connection to ongoing military operations in several active conflict zones. Maria's performance was evaluated by experts who understood the technical challenges of urban sniper operations and the psychological pressures of engaging multiple targets under time constraints that measured success in seconds rather than minutes. The tactical innovations that Maria had developed for the hotel operation were incorporated into training programs that were used to prepare other security teams for similar threats. Her ability to coordinate Overwatch operations with ground-level security measures represented a significant advancement in protective techniques that had applications for corporate security operations across multiple industries. Catherine Walsh submitted a performance evaluation that recommended Maria for additional responsibilities that would allow her to train other operatives in long-range marksmanship and tactical coordination. The evaluation noted that Maria's communication methods were actually superior to conventional verbal briefings in situations where precision and clarity were essential for operational success. Her written reports and tactical diagrams provided information that could be studied and referenced during operations, reducing the possibility of miscommunication that might compromise team coordination. The success of the hotel operation led to additional assignments that tested different aspects of Maria's capabilities and experience. Corporate executives who were involved in sensitive government contracts began requesting her services specifically, recognizing that her military background provided protection that exceeded anything available through conventional security companies. Her reputation spread through networks of federal contractors and defense industry executives who understood the value of having access to someone with her unique combination of skills and experience. Maria's role expanded to include threat assessment for corporate facilities that might be targeted by hostile intelligence organizations. Her analysis of security vulnerabilities drew on her experience with infiltration techniques and surveillance methods that were used by professional operatives who specialized in corporate espionage and industrial sabotage. Her recommendations resulted in security improvements that prevented several attempted breaches at facilities that housed sensitive research and development projects. The psychological adaptation to her new role required ongoing support from Dr. Amanda Foster, who continued to serve as Maria's therapist while also providing consultation services to other team members who were dealing with the transition from military to civilian security work. Amanda's research on combat veteran integration into private sector operations was enhanced by her observations of Maria's successful adaptation to leadership responsibilities that required tactical decision-making under pressure. Maria's silence remained an asset that allowed her to observe and analyze threats without revealing her capabilities to potential enemies. Her ability to assess situations without verbal communication was particularly valuable in international operations, where language barriers might complicate conventional security coordination. Her tactical plans could be implemented by team members who spoke different languages, using visual signals and written instructions that transcended verbal communication barriers. The training programs that Maria developed for other operatives included innovations in long-range marksmanship that drew on her experience with extreme distance shooting in challenging environmental conditions. Her instructional methods were adapted to accommodate students who preferred visual learning over verbal explanation, using demonstration and hands-on practice rather than lecture-based training. The techniques she taught were based on mathematical principles and physical conditioning rather than theoretical knowledge that couldn't be applied under combat stress. 6 months after the hotel operation, Maria received recognition from the Association of Corporate Security Professionals, an organization that honored individuals who had made significant contributions to protective services and threat prevention. The award ceremony was conducted with security measures that protected the identities of recipients whose work involved classified operations, but the recognition represented acknowledgement from the private security industry that Maria's innovations had influenced operational standards across multiple disciplines. The presentation was made by General Patricia Hayes, who had traveled from Washington to personally deliver recognition that couldn't be awarded through normal military channels. The ceremony was private and unofficial, but it represented acknowledgement from the highest levels of military leadership that Maria's transition to civilian security work had enhanced national security capabilities in ways that complemented ongoing military operations. Maria's acceptance of the award was conducted through a written statement that was read by Catherine Walsh, expressing gratitude for the opportunity to continue serving in a capacity that utilized skills developed during military service while contributing to the protection of civilian personnel and critical infrastructure. The statement noted that effective security required the same attention to detail and tactical precision that characterized successful military operations, regardless of whether those operations were conducted in combat zones or corporate environments. The recognition ceremony was attended by other veterans who had transitioned to private security work, creating an opportunity for Maria to connect with peers who understood the challenges of adapting military skills to civilian applications. The networking that occurred during the event led to collaborative opportunities that enhanced the capabilities of multiple security firms, while sharing innovations that improved protective services across the industry. Dr. Amanda Foster's research on veteran integration was enhanced by data collected during Maria's transition to leadership responsibilities, providing insights that were used to develop support programs for other military personnel who were adapting to civilian careers. The research demonstrated that successful integration required opportunities to use military skills in constructive applications rather than simply suppressing those capabilities in favor of conventional civilian employment. The building where Maria had once worked as a mute janitor was transformed into a training facility that was used to prepare security teams for operations in corporate environments. The executive floors that had once ignored her existence were now equipped with tactical simulation equipment that allowed operatives to practice the kind of close-quarters combat and precision marksmanship that had proved essential during the Westfield incident. Maria's office in the renovated building overlooked the same city streets where she had once felt invisible and unrecognized, but now her work involved protecting people who depended on her expertise for their survival and success. The transformation from hidden asset to recognized expert was complete, but her commitment to service remained the driving force behind every tactical decision and operational plan. The mute janitor had found her voice through actions that spoke louder than words, proving that leadership and expertise could be demonstrated through performance rather than proclamation. Her story became part of the curriculum at military academies and security training programs, illustrating the importance of recognizing and utilizing individual capabilities regardless of conventional expectations or institutional barriers. The tattoo that had been concealed beneath a cleaning uniform was now displayed as professional credentials that opened doors to opportunities that had been closed during years of enforced invisibility. The symbols that commemorated an 8-mile shot were now recognized as identification of someone whose service had influenced military doctrine and private security standards in ways that would affect operations for decades to come. Maria's legacy was built not just on extraordinary marksmanship, but on the demonstration that heroism could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances when individuals were willing to act according to their capabilities rather than their job descriptions. The invisible woman had become indispensable, but her fundamental character remained unchanged. A warrior who understood that true service meant being ready to protect others regardless of recognition or reward. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.